What's up, Degenerate Nation? Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast presented by BetMGM. This is the Week 4 college football betting preview. I'm Stuckey, and joining me, as always, Colin Wilson. Colin, we got through the Week 3 slate. I'm counting down the minutes to the start of this Week 4 slate like I'm 12 and it's Christmas. I can't wait. How great is this slate going to be?
What do we have? 15 games in the look ahead section this week. We have like 15 games in the marquee matchup, not many look aheads. So, I mean, there's no sense in wasting any time and any extra noise. Let's get right to it.
Yeah, don't worry. I think we're going to get to like 27, 28 games today. So it's going to be a jam-packed. I'll try to speed us up where necessary so we don't go 4 hours. But I cannot wait to break this slate down. And yes, there will be trash. As always, I'm wearing what better shirt to signify this amazing marquee matchup than I got my UTEP Minor Nation. Maybe UTEP, will UTEP cover a game this year? I don't think they have. Well, we haven't heard from our guy on the voicemails. I think this is the weekend, by the way, a little teaser alert. But let's jump right into it. Before we get to, I think we're going to do 7 marquee games today. Let's hit a couple quick look ahead or look aways based on the situation. Won't spend much time on these. But let's start with the fallout from Florida, Tennessee from last weekend. A couple suspensions, too, in the first half from the end when Heupel unnecessarily calls a timeout at the end of the game. And then they late hit the quarterback, just clown stuff. But I'm sure that both teams will be fired up to face each other next year. But from that game, you have Tennessee hosting UTSA and Florida hosting Charlotte, both laying pretty big numbers here. Tennessee close to 3 touchdowns, Florida sitting around 4 touchdown favorites. The spot is Charlotte. I just can't get behind it. Like, even if Florida's disinterested, even if Graham Mertz isn't at 100%, they might just be able to hand it off and run it for days on the Charlotte D. I still don't have a great grasp on what Charlotte wants to do at quarterback. It's a good spot. I wouldn't blame you for taking 4 touchdowns, but I'm passing. Tennessee, UTSA, it's a pass. I haven't seen enough from Milton yet. UTSA has so many injuries. I don't know how healthy Frank Harris is, and you need him to be mobile, especially when you're stepping up in class. So I would expect Tennessee to come out with full focus, but not a team I'm looking to back right now, and I just can't get to either dog. So I'm passing on both of these games. Do you have any thoughts on either?
Yeah, I'm taking Tennessee against UTSA. UTSA is absolutely horrific in defending the pass. Yeah, they like to be real fast, but Frank Harris might not be there. I think that gives way to Eddie.
That could work against them too. If they're working fast and Tennessee's working fast and you're a dog, like, that's not what you want to do as an overmatched team.
It could get really bad. And UTSA right now they're outside the top 100 in strength of record, strength of schedule. So when you reel off their stats, you have to realize it's come against some really bad competition. Meep is 129th in coverage. They're 106th in pressures and 124th in tackling. Those are some terrible defensive numbers going in to take on a team that should be pretty pissed off and embarrassed about losing that game and against their rival. There's no overlook for Tennessee after the Florida loss. And, you know, this is just a really bad spot for a UTSA defense. And if they're missing their quarterback, this could get ugly real fast. But I don't expect Josh Heupel to take his foot off the pedal here. He needs a good win after what happened last week, and I expect them to fly over their number.
Yeah, I could see this getting. I mean, UTSA.
We should mention Nico too. If Joe Milton is terrible or inefficient, or if he's not meeting Josh Heupel, I mean, Nico Iamaleava, he might.
You were good with just Nico. You always have to try it. We're talking UCLA later, so I'm sure you're going to get your guy Leatu to mention to him.
I'm waiting for Nico. I've been waiting for Nico all year. Once Nico comes in, it's back to Rocky Top.
Yeah. I mean, UTSA also has, look, Frank Harris is not fully healthy. You need him to be fully healthy. They also have offensive line injuries. DeCorian Clark, who's their best receiver, still hasn't played. And then their defense is bad. So yeah, Meep, it's pretty ugly right now. Any interest in backing Charlotte?
I haven't seen enough out of Charlotte. I project the game exactly where it's at, but I expect it to kind of take off. And Pogge said it's a fluid situation at quarterback. either Ivy or Jalen Jones. They both played in the last game. It looks like Ivy may get the call here. They both played in the second half. Ivy hasn't thrown a turnover-worthy play, and Jones has had 3 INTs and 3. So the quarterback situation is really scary. But the one thing where I can't get in on this, Biff Poggi love and the Charlotte love is that they're 130th in havoc allowed. And that scares the hell out of me trying to back these guys, because while they've been covering in certain parts of the games each week, they make mistakes and shoot themselves in the foot. And until I see some offensive continuity, I just cannot get behind it.
Yep. Moving on to another spot here. Duke has a tricky spot, just like Florida. Like, I could see Florida being pretty disinterested. Duke travels up to UConn. They were supposed to be a little improved after a bowl last year. They've been awful, 0-3, including a loss at home against FIU last week. And their quarterback's out. You're down to Robertson, who can't really throw the ball. But Duke goes to UConn. This line is sitting around 3 touchdowns. I think it's, let's see, has it come off that's 21.5. Duke's a 21.5 point favorite. They have Notre Dame next week. I can't get there with UConn. They were circled as a potential spot, but they just can't score. And like Duke, the floor for Duke's offense is so high with, even just the quarterback run. Like last week, I feel like the game could go just like it did against Northwestern last week. Duke's good. Like, I can't upgrade them enough. Elko's doing a tremendous job. And this UConn team, their offense is disgusting. Like, they're going to have to, in order to cover this game, it's got to be like 24-10. Can they hold Duke to like 20? I'm not sure. I know Duke will probably sleepwalk here, but I have no interest in backing this UConn team right now.
I don't either, but the money in the market says that you should. I mean, there's been some buyback on here down to 21.5. There's a couple 21s at some softer books that are starting to show up, and Duke should absolutely crush on both sides of the ball. Heavy advantages and success rate, quality drives. And Duke did play at Kansas in a similar spot last year, kind of an ACC sandwich, or before the ACC play started with Virginia. They lost the game 35-27, but I mean, that's coming against Kansas. It's like real competition. They didn't completely no-show against that Jayhawks team, so I expect them to show up. But I mean, why this is a bigger overlook spot, Elko coached at Notre Dame before he took off and went to Texas A&M. Notre Dame had a season where they went 4-8. Mike Elko got hired. He became such a big part of that program. He left Clark Lee behind. I mean, Notre Dame is a really big game personally for Elko. So that's where the overlook comes in here. I don't know if that's what's forcing this down, because it certainly can't be Taquan Roberson getting all the snaps against FIU, 15 of 32 for 172. I mean, it's just not pretty what's going on with UConn whatsoever. But for some reason, some money in this market is pushing this down to 21.
Yeah, I think a part of it might be, you see this with a couple games on the coast. There's some weather system that might hit the East Coast, and there's going to be some wind, and that makes it a little tougher for these big favorites. So that might be part of it. But I just love what I've seen from Riley Leonard and company. I will tell you that maybe the look here is UConn's second half, because Duke, they might be sleepwalking, but I just feel like they're too talented to not jump out to a lead. If they do, then I feel like they're going to sit on this in the second half. Here's their upcoming schedule. Like, they got to just make sure that they're healthy and not showing anything. Notre Dame, NC State, at Florida State, at Louisville, Wake, at North Carolina. Like, that's their next 6 weeks. You can't really be messing around up in the second half at UConn. So I'm sure that they'll take it easy. So I might look UConn second half. All right, moving on here. UAB at Georgia. Georgia, after a pretty lackluster effort, especially in the first half against South Carolina, they have Auburn on deck. They face your boy, Trent Dilfer, and UAB. This should be a laugher. Part of the absolute joke of a schedule for Georgia. Georgia here is a 42.5 point favorite. I'm not laying 42.5 in the spot, and I'm not backing UAB. Pass for me. You got something here?
Oh boy. I project this at 38, so it's a little bit lower. This is the same spot.
You're playing Trent?
Let me talk through it. Maybe, I don't know. I kind of lean something, but listen, this is the same spot Georgia was in last year. Kent State. This was the same spot, this sandwich game. And Kent State lost by 17. It was 26-13 at half. I don't know what's going on with Georgia in these and the sleepy spots that they have, whether it's, Lad McConkey, some injuries, or I'm not sure. But I mean, Georgia boat raced South Carolina the week before, not like last week. And that's where I think the difference is, Kirby's unhappy with, 2 drives that were more than 10 plays. They came away with just 3 points. He emphasized that over and over and over, that this offense was generating these long methodical drives, and they ended up with only 3 points. He's emphasized the red zone this week. So we'll see if Carson Beck, who didn't have any TDs against South Carolina, and he has 3 on the season and an interception. Kirby mentioned in his presser that the reason he's only made 4 completions over 20 yards is just a product of the games that he's had. It's not because that they're limiting him in their throws. But when you look over at UAB, they actually have a really high success rate in throwing with Jacob Zeno. I didn't expect Zeno to have these kind of passing numbers out here so far. His ADOT has been cut in half from the last 10 years to 5.5. So everything that they throw is short, but it has been successful. Only 7 of them have been over 20 yards in the 98 that he's thrown. So they're going to play an east to west game. I don't think that really works against the Georgia defense, who is easily the fastest going from east to west than they are north to south. So because there's going to be a high pace in this game, both of these teams are running a little bit faster than you would expect, especially UAB, who has kind of run like a slug the last few years. That's going to create some extra possessions here in this game. I think after the slow start last week, like Georgia really struggled to get offensively on into the game and take over. They were down 14-3 before they won 24-14. Kirby preaching red zone, maybe some tempo. Carson Beck's going to throw a little bit more. I like the over in this game. So I'm not saying I'm taking UAB or Georgia. I just like the over in this game, and it's a projection that I have above 59.
7:30 at night. I promise you I won't watch 1 second of that game. Last one here before we get to the marquee matchups. USC, they have Colorado next week, then the start of the Big 12 play. Going down to Arizona State. Arizona State with one of the worst performances that we will see in college football this year. They had 8 turnovers. They used 1 million quarterbacks. It was absolutely disgusting. They were shut out for the first time. Shut out at home against a group of 5 team, but shut out at home for the first time since 1988. They host USC, and this number is crazy. USC is a 5-touchdown favorite. I can't get to this number. I don't know who's going to be on the offensive line for Arizona State. They have a ton of injuries there. I don't know who's going to be quarterback. I think it's Drew Pine. He was taking first-team reps. They were all hurt last week. They were down to Conover, the 4th-string kid transfer from BYU. It's going to take me some liquid courage on Saturday after I get to a certain amount of drinks. But once I do, I'm going to bet Arizona State at this number. I have to. First of all, this is their Super Bowl. They can't go to a bowl. I should do this. This should have been in the trash segment. This might be the biggest trash of all. This is their Super Bowl. They can't go to a bowl. They were just embarrassed in back-to-back games. This is it. They have to beat. They're not going to beat. They have to show up here. If they don't, you can bet against them every week the rest of the year. This number is just too high. USC's defense is still not something that I really respect. And last year, Drew Pine is not good, but last year, Drew Pine, 23 of 26 for 320 yards and 3 touchdowns against this USC defense. So, maybe he won't have a pocket to throw in, but too high. This number's too high. USC could be also up 45-0 at the half and then call it a day, and then you still can cover. This number's too high. Do you agree?
Way too high. I mean, I projected at 26, but I mean, I understand the reason why it's moving so high. I mean, with the quarterback situation going on, first off, Jaden Rashada, happy trails. See you next year. I've read that he's redshirted the season, so I think that's pretty much it for him. Unless I don't think he's filled his 4 games, so maybe we see him in a bowl. I don't know. They're not playing a bowl.
They can't go to a bowl.
They can't go to a bowl. They're not going to play a bowl. I don't know if we see Jaden Rashada out at the end of the season, but he is going to redshirt. Pine was listed as questionable, but he's taken all of the reps with the 1, so he is going to play. He had a hamstring in training camp. Now he's having some sort of muscular issue, and Jacob Connor, there's no confidence in this kid whatsoever. So I think what I'm shocked by is that I see USC defensively. They're in the top 5 in defensive finishing drives. They've allowed only 5 opponent drives to get into the red zone. Can you believe that? Only 5 opponent drives at this point in the season have gotten into the USC red zone. So I'm a little bit shocked to see what USC has been able to do defensively. Caleb Williams, 12 TDs on the so far. His big time throw rate is exceeding his career average. His turnover worthy career rate, his turnover worthy play rate is in line with his career, but his big time throws are well above what his career average is. So Caleb Williams is exceeding what we kind of expected here. It's just tough not to see USC get 50. So you're asking Arizona State to get a certain amount of points. I'm not sure if it's smarter to bet on the spread or bet on the fact that you're going to say Arizona State gets what, 12, 11 and a half points. It's got to be somewhere around there.
Yeah. I think that they can get to 17, 20 here. I don't know. Yeah, it's ugly, but it's too high. I got to do it at 5 touchdowns. I'll have a couple drinks, and
I don't think it's done.
That'll enable me to hit submit.
It's not done steaming.
All right, let's move on here to the marquee matches. But before we do, as a reminder, the BBOC podcast is presented by BetMGM. Use bonus code ACTION when signing up to get up to $1,500 paid back in bonus bets if your first bet loses. For new users in Arizona, Colorado, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Louisiana, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, and Wyoming. Terms and conditions do apply. Must be 21 or older. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, let's get to the marquee matchups. As good as it gets on a college football Saturday, we have 7 games that we'll get to and break them all down within the next half hour. Let's start off. We'll go chronologically here. Let's start off with Florida State at Clemson. Clemson's a 2 to 2.5 point underdog, over under 55.5. This game's at noon Eastern on ABC. All right, so as I've always said, this is a Dabo Sweeney and Cade Klubnik podcast. Completely kidding. But I really didn't like this Clemson team like you did coming into the year. And then, I see this line, and which was before the season was Clemson -4. Right. And I asked myself, okay, that's a look ahead line. They're not the most efficient things in the world. And we have data points on what we've learned about these two teams. And the consensus, if you ask most people, will be, Florida State's really good. Clemson's a fraud. And while I do agree that Clemson has not utilized the portal and they're slowly falling behind, have we really learned that much? So let me make my case. Florida State comes out and beats LSU in impressive fashion on primetime. First weekend of the year. Clemson, meanwhile, loses to Duke at home. I mean, loses at Duke as a substantial favorite, double-digit favorite, on primetime, a game everyone's watching. So I get that those two things stick in everyone's mind, and there's not a ton of marquee matchups early in the season. But Clemson vomited all over near the goal line. Like, the result could have been way different. By the way, LSU also vomited near the goal line throughout the first half, and they led it at the end of the first half. But it was Clemson also implementing a brand new offense, and they didn't really utilize it. They have started through the past couple of weeks, but it's the first game, new offense, tons of mistakes, just like fumbles near the goal line. So like Florida State could have lost that game if things go differently early, and Clemson still could have won that game if they don't fumble near the goal line. And the common perception of these two teams would be completely different. And then on top of that, they're now writing off the fact that Florida State almost lost to Boston College, like just because they beat LSU. So I still have some issues with this Florida State defense. I think Jordan Travis is okay, but maybe he's a little banged up and not at full capacity. He hasn't looked fantastic since that first game. The running game hasn't got going. And then Clemson the last 2 weeks has exceeded market expectations. The offense are actually finally starting to throw it downfield. So I don't think that much has changed from what we know about these two teams. So Clemson at 2, I'm waiting on the 3, but Clemson getting points here, I like. If I can't get the 3, I'll wait to see if I can get it in game. They will be part of my round robin, I'll tell you that. And I think that the market has overreacted here just to that first weekend, because that's what everyone remembers. A lot of anchoring bias going on. So I think this line is wrong. I don't think that Clemson should be -4 as they were preseason, but I don't think they should be an underdog here. What say you?
I agree with you. I'm waiting for a 3. I've been waiting for a 3 all week. Listen, Clemson's just going to have to run the ball with more authority here. There are things that I see with their numbers that they could be better, or at least utilize it. I'm not sure if Garrett Riley is. I think maybe he's been on some sort of search to find a third wide receiver, because so far Antonio Williams has been great. They're using Jake, Brenningstool. He's been a possession target receiver at this point. Bo Collins averages more than 2.2 yards. But after that, they just really haven't had any kind of explosives in the pass game. They need to focus more on what is good with this team, and that is the run. Klubnik's had 10 designed runs, 5 scrambles, and he's had 3 fumbles. That's just been catastrophic. That's the catastrophic portion that Dabo Swinney has been talking about, is that Cade Klubnik has got to stop killing these drives. And, there's a lot of cases that say he's just a sophomore. He didn't play all the time. I feel like the same excuses we made for DJU for a long time, we're kind of making about Cade Klubnik. But when you move past that on the ground game, Phil Maffa is just completely underutilized right now. 3 TDs, his highest yards after contact number in his 3-year career is going on right now. He had 120 on the ground versus Florida State last year. He can absolutely do this. Will Shipley, 26 career rushing TDs at Clemson. He has none this year. None. He has a similar breakaway percentage, a full yard above his career average in yards per attempt this year. I mean, Will Shipley's running the best that he ever has, and he's completely underutilized. So if Garrett Riley leans into that, then that is a huge plus here. And FSU can be run on. I mean, don't get it twisted. They're outside the top 50 in defensive rushing success rate, rush EPA. They're 115th in tackling. This team, which we saw against LSU, and everybody remembers that fourth quarter of bullying them over, they're still very undisciplined. They still have tackling issues. They still have penalty issues. They still are just, not buttoned up like you would expect from a team that's going to make the college football playoff and contend to win it all. Now, when I switch over to the FSU side, I don't see them running that successfully. Trey Benson averages 2.9 yards after contact. His career average is 4.5. He's more than a yard and a half off his career average. Like, is there a weight issue? Is there an injury issue? What is going on with Trey Benson? Because he's not the same back whatsoever. Yeah. He averaged 1.7 yards after contact against BC's defense. So Florida State is now 86 in standard down success rate. And they're just making hay in passing downs with Jordan Travis improvising. And I don't think that's going to work, especially with a corner like Nate Wiggins, who's one of the highest graded corners of all of FBS per PFF. And, he switches from the left to the right corner. So you can see him go get on Johnny Wilson. He'll be on Keon Coleman. He'll do whatever he's got to do. But this is an older secondary that Clemson is starting to grow up. And Clemson's top 10 in defensive havoc right now. They have 17 passes defense. They have 24 tackles for loss. So I'm all in on Clemson here. And if Garrett Riley leans into this rush attack, they can be a lot more explosive. And that's how you beat Florida State, is on the ground.
Yeah. 2 other things to note here. Florida State, I was reading the kickers could come into play. This should be a close competitive game. I just feel it in my bones that Clemson's going to win this, let's call it 27-24. Ryan Fitzgerald, the kicker for Florida State, I don't trust him as far as I can throw him. I was reading an article today saying he found his reason for playing and his why, and he's back and he's thriving. He's 3 for 3 on field goals this year from 32 yards. Give me a break. Guy was 3 of 6 from between 30 and 39 last year. But Clemson, their kicking situation is not great. Their kicker, who missed, I think, 4 of his first 5, is not the kicker anymore. Dabo called some kid. He doesn't do the transfer portal, but he called some kid that was taking online master's classes that was a walk-on kicker before. It wasn't on the team. He's their kicker this weekend. So I forget his name, Dietz or Heights, I forget. But look at the kicking situation. Could be very interesting this weekend. But yeah, some kid who was basically just in his dorm or apartment. I don't know. I might be remembering the story exactly. The details not exactly right. But Dabo basically hit him up and was like, dude, we need you to kick because our kicker stinks. And he wasn't on the team, and now he is. And now he's going to be the kicker confirmed. He's going to be the kicker this weekend.
You mean he's not Dabo didn't find him at a keg party? That's where Lane Kiffin found his kicker.
Found his punter.
Punter at the keg party. That's right.
Yeah. by the way, including the postseason, Dabo Swinney 11-4 against the spread that's over 73% as an underdog against ranked opponents, covering by an average margin of over 6 points per game. He's won 9 of those 15 games straight up as a pup. All right, let's move on to the second marquee game of the day, and that's Colorado at Oregon. Oregon's a 3-touchdown favorite here, over under 70.5. This game's at 3:30 Eastern on ABC. By the way, 70.5, that's going to be considered low if Oregon puts up, 70 and USC puts up 70. Both could happen. And then, Colorado still does their fair share of scoring. That USC Colorado total next weekend. We'll talk about that later. By the way, these are 2 ranked teams. Since 2005, in games between 2 ranked opponents, favorites of 17 or more have gone 38-23 against the spread. That's 62.5%, covering by 5 points per game. When favored by 21 or more in a ranked matchup against a conference opponent, the favorite is 14-4 against the spread, 70%. I think that trend continues here. I think this is a complete mismatch. What we've seen from Colorado, you got to give Deion a lot of credit. They're so much more improved than last year. But like the first game, they came out, again, getting back to this like anchoring bias, what people remember. TCU had no idea what to expect. Like, what do you go off of? Nothing. Like the defense just got completely shell-shocked. So I think they really benefited from that. Then the next weekend, you play, and Sanders has been amazing, don't get me wrong, but you play a team that could not snap the ball. And when they did, they would just throw it to you. And then you play Colorado State, a team that got destroyed by Washington State. They should have beat you. It's just marching up and down the field. So I feel like I have a pretty good handle on this team now. The offensive line is bad. You also don't have Travis Hunter for both sides of the ball. Your defense is really bad. And Oregon, you can't run the ball either, really. And you want to have a lot of possessions. It's just going up to Oregon, by the way, is, for what it's worth, they are the most profitable home conference favorite in all of college football over the past 30 years. This just has, the dam's going to break at one point, because I just don't see how this Oregon offense, and home Bo Nix, by the way, is going to not go up and down the field at will. And then on the other side, you're just not going to be able to survive on those third and longs without one of your best weapons in Hunter against this pass rush that is just going to be in Sanders' face. And by the way, Sanders, who's been amazing this year, he's not that fast, right? Like, he doesn't have like breakaway speed to evade this rush, which I think is going to eventually overtake him. And I'm sure they want to put up, Dan Lanning wants to put up a number here, and they want to pad Bo Nix's little Heisman stats. Maybe we'll get another billboard after this weekend. So I think that they're going to come out, they're going to get out to a big lead, and they're going to keep their foot on the gas, and this thing gets ugly. I like Oregon minus 21 or better.
I like Oregon minus 21 and whatever it wants to go up to. I said for weeks that Deion is at the craps table and he's hot. It's time to bet the don't pass. It's that 7 is coming. It's time to crap out here. And I think we'll start off by saying, like, what is Travis Hunter's value worth to the spread? We generally ask that question about quarterbacks, but I think we have to ask it when Colorado is a collection of players through the transfer portal, but only 4 or 5 of them really affect the outcome of these games. And Travis Hunter's one of them. He's had 157 snaps on offense and 185 on defense. Now, Colorado has 2 explosive wide receivers, Jimmy Horn and Xavier Weaver. So I will say Hunter's biggest value is on the defensive side of the ball, playing corner, because he could kind of chop the field in half after what everybody saw what he did against TCU. But then when he went out of the game, Kendrick Breedlove came in. He's a transfer from Ole Miss to play corner. He played 53 snaps against Colorado State, and Jay Norvell went after him immediately. He was targeted 7 times. He allowed 5 catches, a couple explosives. I expect Bo Nix to do the exact same. He's going to go right after Breedlove at the corner position. So Colorado offensively, you mentioned it, they can't establish the run. They haven't been able to establish the run in any game. Dylan Edwards, yeah, he's pretty fun to watch on TV, but and he's a huge spark plug for the offense, but that's come out of the passing game. He's averaging 11.4 yards per catch. They can't generate anything from behind the line of scrimmage and a rushing attempt. And the defense is still like I said, living at the craps table. They're 121st in third down stops. They just happen to have these great havoc plays in certain key points. They're near dead last in defensive passing down success rate, and they're outside the top 100 in havoc. And they don't generate turnovers. They don't generate tackles for loss. They don't do a lot of things that you need to do to be a good defense. Oregon, when I dump out the stats, Oregon's fifth in strength of record, 58th in strength of schedule. It's good that they went down to play Texas Tech to beef some of these numbers up. There is a combination of stats that they have that made this so easy to bet, and I would still bet. And that is they are number 1 in the nation in offensive quality drives, and they are 5th in the nation in offensive finishing drives. What does that mean? Nobody is marching down the field at a better rate than Oregon in all their games and all their possessions. And they are 5th in offensive finishing drives. Almost every single time they get past the 40-yard line, they're scoring a touchdown. Then you throw in the fact that Stuckey and I have been preaching for years that Bo Nix at home, whether it's Jordan Hare or Autzen, makes them an absolute machine. I don't think it matters, because the one thing where you can attack Oregon, and we said this in the Pac-12 preview preseason, why am I not I love Oregon and I've got them highly power rated, but why am I not taking them to win the Pac-12? Because they can't defend the rush. Texas Tech averages 60% success rate in rushing attempts. They average 7.7 yards per play in rushing attempts. Can Colorado do that? Nope. Are we betting Oregon? Yeah, a lot. So that's where we're at with the Ducks.
Yeah, Travis Hunter, by the way, like he's usually it's like you got to be, if you're not a quarterback, it's hard to be worth much to the spread. But in the case of Colorado, he's playing both sides of the ball. And Colorado is very unique in that they have some really talented guys in their starting 11 on each side of the ball, but there's not a lot of depth. So you have a guy who's you're relying on for both sides of the ball, and you don't have a lot of depth. You have a 5-star in Cormani McClain at corner. He's not ready. You can listen to all of the Dion quotes, and he's just not ready to go yet. So that's why, you have an Ole Miss transfer in, and it's clearly a drop-off. Also, another thing that I'll mention is Oregon's had a much easier path in just winning these games, while Colorado has just gotten up every week. It's these huge events. That's exhausting. Like, they have to be just exhausted as a team, and that could lead to just this dam breaking in a very hostile environment. All right, let's move on to our third marquee game of the day, also at 3:30 Eastern on CBS. Ole Miss at Alabama. Really fascinating game here. Alabama's sitting around a touchdown favorite. Ole Miss continues to take money. Before the season, this line was Alabama minus 15, I think. Over under 55.5. So, Ole Miss, their offense has looked really good. They've got a couple of fraudulent covers. The defense is different under Pete Golding, who was at Alabama last year. So there's a lot of familiarity here. You obviously have Lane Kiffin at coach. You have Pete Golding, the defensive coordinator. And this defense isn't the same as it was last year. Last year it was like, let's just drop 8, bend, don't break. But now they're a little more focused on the run. I'm sure they're going to be really familiar with Jalen Milroe and his weaknesses and strengths. I don't know why Nick Saban came out and named Milroe the starter this week. Why give Ole Miss that competitive advantage of game planning for Milroe? I don't get it. But it is what it is. So if you look on the surface, if I were to make an argument for Alabama, I would say Alabama was a 7 to a 7.5 point favorite, even though I bet Texas against Texas, and Texas at home a couple weeks ago, and they lost, and convincingly so. So they have to be downgraded. But now, Texas is a touchdown better than Ole Miss for my power ratings. So now you're laying 7, maybe under 7, but there's something off with this Alabama team. It's not, Milroe obviously is limited as a passer. He can run. I'm sure Ole Miss is going to probably play that aggressively. So the big variance in this game is Milroe can throw the deep ball. He can't really throw the intermediate routes. He can't really read defenses, but he can throw a hell of a deep ball. So that could, there's a lot of variance in that. Like, how many deep balls does Alabama hit? Same thing goes with Ole Miss. They have the chance to hit some explosives here too, which scares me off the total, because I think Alabama wants to kind of pound this and kind of just make this ground and pound and control the clock. And, Ole Miss wants to play faster, but Alabama has a chance at some deep shots, and so does Ole Miss. So it has a chance to blow up, just like we saw the Texas game, the Texas total 8. So I'm staying away from the total. I have an Ole Miss 25-1 future to win the West. I'm rooting for Ole Miss here. I lean Ole Miss. I'll tell you that, but I'm going to stay on the sidelines. The Alabama defense, I still have to rate highly, but I still think that they're probably a top 5 unit. But the offense is just off. I don't care who was playing quarterback last week for Alabama. What was it like? To throw for 30 yards in the first half against South Florida, a South Florida defense that gave up 400 yards passing to Florida A&M, that got destroyed by Western Kentucky, is very concerning. I think it's the fewest points that Alabama scored against a non-conference opponent in 15 years. There's something off with this team. The offensive line, the quarterback, a combination of just things that are giving me bad vibes with this Alabama
The way
team.
Nick Saban is letting things loose, like the way Nick Saban is handling this team, yeah, there's a lot off.
They've had 4 or 5 touchdowns called back for penalties. You saw that in the Texas game too. Saban might be the end of the road for Saban. I still have a lot of respect for him. The market still has a lot of respect for Alabama, as they should. The priors are still going to be high, but it seems like there's some smart money out there taking Ole Miss here. And I tend to agree. I don't know if I'll end up betting it. I'm going to be rooting for Ole Miss here for my future. What do you think?
Well, I think if you're dominating college football for a span of 15 years and you have a number of high-profile assistants come through these reclamation projects where they failed and they had to come through your program and rebuild themselves, and then they go out and then they get players at the same level that you have, that's obviously going to even the playing field. And I think a lot of that you've seen with Sark, and now I think you're going to see it with Lane Kiffin. And look, I didn't listen to my power ratings against Texas. I power rated the game, 3, Alabama -3. I didn't listen to it because I thought Jalen Milroe was going to be able to do something special. The problem is Tommy Rees continues to call an offensive style that's built for Notre Dame and for Tyler Buchner and not for Jalen Milroe. You can't just tell me why Alabama is not running a mesh RPO Jalen Hurts style where he has one hot read. He does his RPO, he checks his defensive ends, and he has one hot read on the pass. Other than that, you let him go. Instead, we're running him out of shotgun and expecting him to read 2 or 3 progressions. Or I just don't understand what this offense is.
Milroe's not a pro style quarterback.
And I keep going back to like Saban just praising the shit out of Tommy Rees in the summer. Like, is one of the best offensive minds in the nation. The rest of us are just kind of like, huh? So, the offense just has not fit whatsoever. I've got so many questions on both sides of the ball. I did play a first half under, and I kind of jokingly tweeted out that Lane has only, scored 41 points in the first 3 quarters and 44 points in the fourth quarter. But really,
24 points in the last 7 minutes against Georgia Tech. I'm still pissed.
But let's look at some things that I have some. These are just questions. I'm not going to answer. I'm just going to give you the questions. Trey Harris, most explosive wide receiver for Ole Miss. He's day to day. I would suggest by the steam that we've seen in the market, there may be some positive news on him. Looks like Zachary Franklin is going to play. The huge transfer that came in from UTSA. We'll see how much rust that he has. Quinshon Judkins, why is he only averaging, 2.4 yards after contact? He's just had a huge dip. We'll see if, maybe he's healthy now. Can Ole Miss get better at the line of scrimmage? Tulane stuffed 15 of 31 carries. That kind of gives me concern about the Ole Miss offensive line. And then I switch over to the Alabama side. Can this Alabama offensive line project Jalen Milroe? I don't think so. Not under any circumstance. It hasn't been shown to me at all. I spoke about.
They got pushed around by the USF. They couldn't get a push against USF.
Yeah, that's scary. That's scary. The offensive scheme doesn't match the quarterback that you have running. And Alabama is still committing penalties. Remember the reason that I also took Alabama over Texas? Because Alabama had 3 penalties against Middle Tennessee. They were like the most heavily penalized team in the nation last year. And then boom, all of a sudden it's a huge problem again. Alabama's offensive line, they're now 97th in havoc allowed. That's a huge number. I can't believe that's associated with Alabama. And they're 77th in offensive momentum killer. And, that's just a way of measuring Did you get stopped on fourth downs? Did you have penalties? Did you shoot yourself in the foot? And Alabama's doing all those things on offense, and I don't expect it to get any better. So I'm on Ole Miss here, and I'm on a first half under.
Howdy toddy. All right, let's stay on another game at 3:30 Eastern on Fox, another marquee matchup. I mean, we have like you have Florida State, Clemson at noon, and then you have Colorado, Oregon, Ole Miss, Alabama, UCLA, Utah at 3:30. You have a trio of games that we're going to get to next, and Oregon State, Washington State, Ohio State, Notre Dame, and Iowa, Penn State, all at night at 7, and then just many other good games to sprinkled out. What a day. If you're in Lexington and want to come over and watch some games here at the bar, slide into those DMs. Should be just wall-to-wall action. I cannot wait. But let's talk UCLA at Utah. Utah, 4.5-point favorite here, over under 52.5. This game is at 3:30 Eastern on Fox. Actually, I should say, as of the time that we're recording this is going to be something to watch. Utah's now 6-point favorite. Over under is 52.5. Maybe that is market news on Cam Rising. Kyle Whittingham keeps the quarterback news as zip as any coach in the country. If you recall last year in a primetime game, no one knew that Cam Rising was out until basically the kickoff. That's the big news here. He's been practicing. I assumed the plan was for him to always play here in this game. And if he does, that's obviously a major upgrade over Bryson Barnes. And, Johnson, their running quarterback, he's been good in spurts, but now people have a book on what they want to do with him, and he's limited as a passer. We saw how limited the offense was against Baylor without Cam Rising. On the other hand, there's still some quarterback uncertainty with UCLA. Is this Dante Moore's offense 100% of the time, all the time moving forward? If it is, that's probably where UCLA can reach their highest ceiling. But then again, Chip Kelly might be saying to himself, this is a true freshman in Rice Eccles, one of the hardest places to play in the country. So do you get some veteran snaps in there? I don't know what Chip Kelly's thinking with this whole quarterback room. I assume Rising's going to play. Is he going to be rusty? I don't know. Too much uncertainty for me in this game. This is a easy pass for me. What do you have? These are two of your darlings.
I know these are the two teams that I took to win the Pac-12. So it's a really hard, for me to side with one or the other here, but let's start off with UCLA. When you look at Dante Moore, he has gone on the road. I wouldn't consider Snapdragon Stadium in San Diego State to be the same sort of environment about what he's going to have here. He went 17 of 27, 3 TDs, but if you look further into the stats, really only one big time throw, and he had a mistake in there. And that was the only game that Dante Moore was allowed to scramble. I mean, he had a fumble in that game, but you haven't seen him leave the pocket since then. So, UCLA has been fantastic in standard downs, and that's because they run the ball 60% of the time. And if you look at some of their running backs, I mean, Carson Steele, absolutely electric, way more electric than he was even at Ball State. Crocky J's averaging 5.2 yards after contact. He's had 7 explosive runs so far this season. And I'm not done there because UCLA might be the new running back U. Between Steele, TJ Harden, Anthony Atkins, and Colson Yankoff, love that name, all average more than 8 yards a carry. And they combined, they have 80 attempts. They all average more than 8 yards a carry. I understand it's San Diego State. I understand it's NC Central and Coastal. I get it. But Florida, had similar rushing stats compared to UCLA when they played Utah. When it comes to success rate and standard downs, Florida kind of fits the profile of what UCLA is. And they had a little bit of, success there, above national average in yards per attempt, a little bit of success right there. So I do expect UCLA to be able to run the ball here. Now, the market is telling me that Cam Rising is going to play, but I don't know how anybody really knows that because Utah doesn't tell anybody. And they might suit Cam Rising up, warm him up, and then not let him play at all. We've seen that happen with this too. But the offense has really struggled with Bryson Barnes, Nate Johnson. He's really pedestrian in rushing attempts against Weber State. They're generating They're generating drives at a top 30 clip, but they're falling short in scoring position. So they have quality drives. They're getting down the field, but they're just not able to put any points up on the board once they get past the 40. Cam Rising can change that, but when you look at the numbers, like UCLA is really good against the pass. Like they're top 5 in everything that you could mention when it comes against the pass. The problem is that if you want to attack UCLA, it has to be on the ground. Uh, and that's just, I don't think Cam Rising, I understand that you're going to move the point spread if Cam Rising is playing, but that's not how you attack UCLA. You attack UCLA on the ground because they're, you want to help me out here on some pronunciation, Laiatu Latu, right?
There you go. You're getting
Laiatu
better. You're getting
Latu.
better.
Yeah. I mean, UCLA is a much better team at defending the pass and generating a pass rush, and they are defending the run. And so for that reason, I don't think Cam Rising coming back is that big of a deal. I'm going to end up playing UCLA in this game. I do like the under because the only way that these two can attack each other is on the ground.
All right, moving on to prime time. Let's stay in the Pac-12 and talk a little Oregon State, Washington State. By the way, our sponsor, BetMGM, I'm looking right now. Oregon minus 20.5, minus 115 right now. I like that. But let's talk the other Pac-12 game. Oregon State at Washington State. Washington State, 3-point home dog here. I believe they've covered 10 straight at home. Over under 50. Let me see where it's at. 58.5 still. This is a fascinating matchup. I have Oregon State to win the Pac-12, so I'm going to be heavily invested in watching and rooting for the Beavs. I make them a little over a 3-point favorite. I think closer to 4, but I've been trying to adjust Washington State because they've been better than I expected. So I'm not really going to get in front of them here because I just could be way off from my preseason numbers. Oregon State has been good. They want to lean on their excellent offensive line, their run game. That sets up everything else. What worries me about this particular matchup, though, is Washington State, on the other hand, they want to throw it. And this year, they want to be more vertical, and they're throwing it more downfield. And their offense is ahead of where I thought it would be at this point with Cam Ward at quarterback. The supposed weakness coming into the year for Oregon State was their back end and their secondary after some of the losses that occurred in the offseason. On the other hand, Washington State's strength so far this year has been stopping the run. So can DJU attack this Washington State secondary? Because Oregon State wants to set up everything with the run. Washington State's more adept at stopping that. And Oregon State wants to attack through the air. Washington State wants to attack through the air, and that's where Oregon State might be the most vulnerable. So maybe from a matchup perspective, this actually does favor Washington State and how they want to attack. But I make the number closer to 4. I'll be rooting for my Beavs. What say you?
I like Oregon State too. I'm not as bullish on the Washington State rush defense as probably what a lot of other people are. And I mean, to me, the handicap in every Oregon State game comes down to, can you stop the rushing attack with DJU and their excellent running backs? And so I go back to Washington State has a strength of schedule of 105th. So I have to go back to the one game where there might've been a rushing attack, which was Wisconsin, but they've completely changed their identity. Wisconsin generated a 57% success rate on 26 rushing attempts. They were only stuffed 6 times. They did limit Wisconsin to only a single 12-yard explosive run. So there is the fact that maybe they had dropped defenders and were able to keep them from having explosives. But Wisconsin was successful in running the ball. And, the biggest issue for Washington State that I can see right now is defensive finishing drives. I mean, it really jumps off the page because it's 127th. They're near dead last on 11 opponent attempts past the 40-yard line. Teams are averaging 4.9 points once they get past the 40 against Washington State. So that includes Colorado State, Wisconsin, Northern Colorado. So, in Oregon State, they continue to cook offensively in scoring position. They do it every year underneath Jonathan Smith. This year is no different. They're top 10. Now, the problem that I would have backing Washington State is that they are still pretty bad and havoc allowed. And Cam Ward, he's got 9 TDs to 0 interceptions on the season. If you go a little bit deeper than that, it's a 4-to-4 ratio and big time throws to turnover worthy plays. And really, he's still fumbling the ball, right? He's had 32 fumbles entering the season. He's had 4 already coming in this year. I think that this is a real problem from a havoc perspective for Washington State. I think that they're going to have a little bit more problems defending the run when you look at that Wisconsin box score. And so I like Oregon State here. I wouldn't buy it over 3. I power rated 2.5. I wouldn't buy it over 3. So I think right now is the last number that I would spend on Oregon State.
All right, let's move on to arguably the biggest game of the day. Ohio State at Notre Dame. Ohio State is a 3-point road favorite here. This game's at 7:30 Eastern on NBC. I cannot wait for this game. These two teams played last year in a game that Notre Dame hung around in. It was an ugly, boring game. Those teams could not look any different right now. By the way, over-under is sitting at 55.5, has come down from the opener. But last year, if you look at these two teams when they played, Notre Dame didn't have a quarterback who could throw a birthday party. They had Drew Pine, who's throwing picks at Arizona State and getting shut out, and Tyler Buckner, who couldn't move the ball with Alabama's weapons against South Florida last weekend. That was their quarterbacks last year. And meanwhile, they were going up against C.J. Stroud, the number 2 overall pick in the NFL draft. But their offense was just completely overmatched. Now, their secondary did a pretty good job against Ohio State and Stroud. They held them to 222 passing yards. And that was despite it being Benjamin Morrison is All-American potential cornerback, his first collegiate start. And Cam Hart, who wasn't his first collegiate start, he's been there for 10 years, it feels like. He was still not 100%. Hell, they still did a pretty good job there. But the offense just couldn't do anything, and that's how Marcus Freeman played this. And by the way, it was his first head coaching appearance for Freeman as well, and Ohio State ended up winning 21-10. Well, those teams couldn't look any different this year because now Notre Dame, in my opinion, has the quarterback advantage. Sam Hartman has come in. He's been fantastic. And, the offense is, you have a very veteran, excellent quarterback who's going to play at the next level. You have a really powerful rushing attack led by Audric Estime. He's averaging, I think, 8.7 yards, somewhere around there, 8.6, 8.8 yards per carry. And you have, an All-American type left tackle. Do have some concerns with their guards, specifically Spindler, who's been beat quite a bit so far this season. But the receivers are better than I expected. Chris Tyree making the transition to slot, giving that element of explosiveness, was something that the offense sorely missed. The offense is so much better. Defense, very veteran. Defensive line, still some questions. Jean Baptiste, the Ohio State transfer, I've liked what I've seen from him. Maybe he flashes here. Linebackers, great for Notre Dame. Very veteran, one of the best linebacker rooms in the country. Secondary, very veteran group I mentioned. You have Morrison on one side, Hart on the other. And so it's a great veteran defense. Meanwhile, Ohio State, the offense has looked meh so far this year, up until last week. Kyle McCord named the starter, same explosive, best receivers in the country, led by Marvin Harrison Jr., but there's a lot of depth there as well. The offensive line has questions. You lost Stroud, you lost your tackles. They're still trying to figure that out. Yes, they went bananas against Western Kentucky. Western Kentucky's defense is horrendous. It's a rebuild too, and they were lucky last year. I'm not taking too much from that. Kyle McCord named the starter. He was in a quarterback battle up until about week 2. He was great last week, but there's little things that I don't like what I see. And, the deep ball has been bad. And look who he's playing against. He hasn't played against anyone. The running game, the offensive line, all of these things aren't, it's hard to gauge when your schedule's been a joke, but they're just not passing the eye test for me. So this boils down to me is I'm going to make McCord beat me on the road by more than a field goal here. Although there should be a fair share of Ohio State fans. I have a couple friends from Cleveland that are going. So yeah, I'm going to make McCord beat me here. I'm going to trust Hartman. I'm going to trust this offensive line. The Ohio State defensive line too, JTT's been disappointing. He's got all the talent in the world. But I do think the Ohio State defense has improved. Second year under Jim Knowles, I do think they're improved. I think that's the biggest takeaway from the Western Kentucky game because they have an explosive passing attack. But I think that I think Notre Dame can actually get a push here with their offensive line. I mean, Ohio State's defensive line was getting pushed a bit by Youngstown, at times by Western Kentucky, at times by Indiana. This Notre Dame rushing attack and offensive line, different level. So I think that Notre Dame's actually going to be able to get a push, and that's going to set up some deep shots for Hartman and company. And on the other side of the ball, I think Notre Dame's corners, you're not going to stop this Ohio State passing attack, but Ohio State is as good at corners as you can ask for in college football to try and stick with Ohio State's receivers. I'm sure they're going to give some help to wherever Harrison is, but I think that this Ohio State offensive line has enough issues. Really green quarterback. And then Freeman, he's talked a lot about wanting to be more aggressive because he wasn't last year, but then he also said he wants to take away the big play on defense, which are kind of contradicting statements, but I think that's what they're going to do early. They're going to make Ohio State beat them with the run, and the run hasn't been there yet. Then on third down is when you could send those linebackers and then take advantage of this Ohio State offensive line. It's still figuring things out. So I like what I've seen from Notre Dame. They've converted me, but I haven't been right on Notre Dame this year. So maybe they're doomed, but I'm going to make McCord beat me here. I like the Irish at a field goal or better. Do you agree?
Well, I make the game 3.5. And so it's been really hard for me to pick a side in this game. And I can find fault in both of them, and I can find the avenue for scoring with both of them. And that kind of leads me to taking the under in this game. I don't have money down on it yet, but I mean, really quick, I agree with you. I don't believe.
But you see the avenues for scoring, so you want to take the under?
Well, no, I'm going to tell you what the avenues are for scoring. And then I'm going to tell you why it leads to the under. And really, I agree with you. Kyle McCord, 4 big-time throws, 4 turnover-worthy plays. There's nothing impressive in the way that he throws, especially deep. Western Kentucky is horrific on defense. They're dead last in line yards. And still, this was, Kyle McCord did not put up numbers that we've seen from C.J. Stroud.
His numbers look great, but there's just receivers open, like underneath of them making plays. Like, his deep ball accuracy has been bad.
And that's what I'm saying. The numbers that I look at on PFF are like, depth, concept, how much is your wide receiver doing the work? The wide receivers are doing all the work, and that's what bothers me about McCord is he's just not impressive as what his touchdown numbers would say. So, and Notre Dame's actually been really decent against the pass. They're top 10 in passing success rate. The corners, Benjamin Morrison, Cam Hart. You mentioned Cam Hart. They've been targeted 21 times this year, and they've only allowed 7 catches. Hart has 3 forced incompletions so far. So I think they're going to be buttoned up at the corner position. Not sure they can keep up with Egbuka and Harrison Jr. I mean, those guys are elite. They're going to be playing at the NFL level, but at least you should be the best hurdles that you can throw in front of them. The area to attack Notre Dame's defense actually, I think, is on the ground. They're 86th in tackle grading, 55th in line yards, and they're not very good in stuff rate. And as much as we talk about Mayan Williams and Travion Henderson, Chip Trayanum is averaging 5.4 yards after contact. That's one of the highest elusive numbers in all of college football. So I think there is an avenue here for Ohio State to get some runs, even if they're met behind the line of scrimmage. They've got some pretty exclusive backs that can create some space and get away from that. So when you look at Notre Dame, they have the same advantages, I think, on the ground if they avoid the interior, which is funny that you mentioned that the guards, there's been some inefficient play at the guard position. That makes me wonder.
What's his name? Rocco Spindler. He's been bad.
Right. And so now I'm like got shades of Ohio State, Michigan last year where Jim Knowles decided to go cover 0 and blitz over the center every single time. Are you going to do that to Notre Dame, or are you going to play protect and drop 8 and not let anybody beat you deep? Because Sam Hartman can do that. So, the one advantage that I think Notre Dame has is running the ball over the tackles, over Joe Alt. When you consider that Youngstown State controlled the line of scrimmage, they were only stuffed 7 times in 31 attempts by Ohio State. That's scary. The Buckeyes are 112th in stuff rate right now, and that's a strength of schedule of 106th. Defensively, you can't control the line of scrimmage at all. Audric Estime, you mentioned how many yards he's averaging. He averages 4.7 after contact. He's a bowling ball. No one's going to be able to bring this guy down. So both teams, in my opinion, have advantages in running the ball, which leads me to wanting to take the under. I know that Marcus Freeman is I take that back. I know that Ryan Day and Jim Knowles are out there watching the tape of what NC State was able to do against Sam Hartman with that 3-3-5. Now, remember, Jim Knowles runs a 4-2-5, so it's still a nickel package. And they have to be taking into consideration that they force Hartman into 3 turnover-worthy plays. Just slap in some tape of what NC State has been able to do to Hartman and make him 3 turnover-worthy plays like per game every time he's played them. Ohio State doesn't run a similar, especially from a 4-man front, but they do run a nickel package, and I expect that to be in there. So I think there's going to be some struggles at the quarterback positions. I think both of them are going to try to run, have a little bit of success moving the chains. I like under 55.5.
Yeah, how I sum this up now. Look, Ohio State could have figured it out last week. Who knows? And McCord could be better than I think, but I trust Hartman more than McCord. I trust the Notre Dame offensive line right now more than the Ohio State offensive line, which means I trust the running game more. So I trust the quarterback, the running game, the offensive line more. Now, wide receivers are nowhere close to as good as Ohio State. Ohio State is the best in the country. So they could make a million plays here and win this game by themselves. But on the defensive side, it's pretty close. These are two veteran, I think, improved defenses. So I'm, on the offensive side, I'm going to take the home team, the veteran quarterback who's been here before. And this is the first time McCord has played in a hostile environment in a big game. So he could make some mistakes as well. So, yeah, I'm going to roll with the Irish here.
Yeah, this is Jim Knowles' third time to prepare for Notre Dame in like the last 16 months. I know it's different personnel. I know Hartman's there, but I mean, Jim Knowles is like, he could write an encyclopedia on how to defend the guys in South Bend. I mean, it's a lot of times he's had to face them.
Yep. For what it's worth, Ryan Day also, I think, is overrated as a head coach. And, when he gets into these games, against ranked teams that they're better than, he tends to like get way too conservative way too often with the personnel that he has. For what it's worth, Ryan Day is 4-10 against the spread as a favorite against top 20 teams. That's 28.5%, including 1-8 in his past 9 matchups. Quarterback Sam Hartman covered 5 of his past 6 as an underdog against ranked opponents. All right, let's move on to the final marquee game. We've agreed a lot. I think we're going to disagree on this one based on a play that I saw come through the app. Iowa, Penn State, 14.5 point favorite. Whiteout, Happy Valley, over under 40.5, 7:30 on CBS. I saw you bet the over. I think you're insane. Yep. This game to me is Penn State's offense hasn't looked right. They can't get the run game going. The receivers have not been impressive. It might be their ultimate downfall. The defense has been unreal. The defense is real. And Iowa's offense, their defense is going to be Iowa defense. Their special teams, by the way, are going to be their special teams. They're going to flip the field. Kirk is going to play his conservative self in this type of game. The Iowa offense is horrendous. They have no receivers. They just lost their top weapon, their tight end, who got injured last week. He's out. And Cade McNamara's hurt. We talked about this on the Sunday recap. You can see him wincing after he runs. He can't make any throws. He's pump faking. He's indecisive. I don't know how Iowa scores more than 10 points in this game. I will trust the Iowa defense and the conservative Iowa play calling and the punting ability of Iowa's best player to keep Penn State under 30 points. There's also a chance this game ends 34-0. Iowa offense is lost right now. McNamara is hurt. The Penn State D is real. The Penn State offense is has not found anything. Last week they put up a bunch of points, but they were gifted by Illinois and that Penn State defense making plays. This is an under for me. This is a classic Iowa under.
To me, it feels like... You want
to make your case for the over?
Well, yeah. I mean, to me, it feels like this is exactly what Penn State saw with Illinois last week. Offensively challenged, ball control. It's just the fact that Luke Altmaier had 1 billion interceptions, and the score should have been a lot higher than the ending, which was 43 points. So, when I look at it from that perspective, I think Penn State's going to get their points. I wouldn't be surprised if they got 30 again against Iowa's defense, but I just feel like there's a lot of similarities with what happened against Illinois last week. Penn State 4.3 yards per play and 39 rushing attempts. They had an explosive. Drew Aller almost exclusively throws in passing downs. It's not hard to figure out when he's going to throw because it's only when they're in long downs and distances. He had a decent success rate, but he's still not throwing explosive passes. And then you get on to the other side. Luke Altmaier had 4 turnover-worthy plays, or all interceptions, and literally he threw it right at the PSU defenders. So, I credit Penn State for getting a ton of pressure here. I think they had 18 pressures on 28 passing attempts. I expect that to happen here. And you say, well, that would play into the under. Not if it gives Penn State field position at the 20 or 30 or turns into a pick 6. I think that this is a havoc boom waiting to happen here. The way Cade McNamara, you and I keep talking about, it's like he's not just the inaccuracy, but the fact that he throws it as fast as he can to somebody that's within 5 yards of him is he has no touch. It's kind of all over the place, and that can turn into quick scores here. I mean, once you get below 41, I start to wonder if havoc plays a part in scoring TDs and field position that can actually put points, hidden yards, and hidden points up on the board. And that's exactly what I'm expecting here. So, Penn State has been the best offensive nationally. When I worry about the Iowa defense, you think, well, what can they do here? Well, Iowa's not creating any havoc whatsoever. They're not turning the ball over from anybody. And Penn State has been number one in the nation in havoc allowed. They haven't had any interceptions. They've only had 2 fumbles. And by the way, those 2 fumbles that they had, they recovered. So they haven't lost any fumbles this year. Drew Aller has yet to throw an interception in his career. He has 1 turnover-worthy play. So I'm making a huge case like why Penn State would cover the spread. But at the same time, neither of these teams have had problems with offensive momentum. Penn State is 13th in finishing drives. They're scoring touchdowns every single time they get into scoring position, not field goals. If this was a game where I saw 2 teams struggling on offensive momentum and stopping themselves in scoring position, yeah, I would consider the under. And there is some wind. I think the wind has contributed why one of these books out there, the sharper book, has moved to 39. But once you get under 41, like defensive TDs, field position is in play for this. That is not a hard total to get over, and Penn State can get over that by themselves.
Yeah, I don't care what offensive momentum numbers look at. That Iowa played Utah State. Western Michigan might have the worst defense in the country. Syracuse put up 50 on them in a half. And Iowa was at like 3 points at midway through the second quarter. And Penn State, you talk about their offensive numbers. You got to remember, they played Delaware. They played a down Illinois defense for what they got. Illinois got shredded by Kansas. And then West Virginia, they were at 31. Iowa's defense is better than West Virginia before a late score. I'll be tweeting at you when this is 10-0 at the end of the first half.
Do you want to know something that really shocked me? Is now McNamara is going to play in this game. Drew Aller has attempted 5 passes over 20 yards. That's it. Like, they've really got him handcuffed. Do you know how many McNamara has thrown over 20 yards? 15, 3 times as much. Now, I'm not saying Iowa's going to have success throwing it straight down the field over 20 yards, but they're doing it. They're doing it. I don't know. It's going to be easy to get over a number this low.
I will be against you there, my friend. All right. Before we move on to rapid fire, do want to remind everyone to make sure you check out the Group of 5 guys. Mike and Mike do a tremendous job. Mike Calabrese and Mike Alnell on the Group of 5 deep dive every Wednesday morning here on BBOC, talking all things Group of 5. A lot of love for Rice and Colorado State this week from Mike and Mike. I could see Rice. I disagree in Colorado State. Horrendous spot for the Rams at Middle Tennessee after that heartbreaker last week. All right, let's go rapid fire here. Throw out a couple games. I'll throw out Cincinnati. 2 touchdowns or better at home against Oklahoma. Oklahoma beat 2 doormats, and then they were arguably outplayed by SMU. I know that they covered by a hook. They scored 2 touchdowns late when SMU had a fake punt, and they went for it at their own 30. But that game was 14-11 with like 10 to go, and SMU actually outgained Oklahoma 367 to 365. And it wasn't like there was garbage yards. Oklahoma threw a 30-yard touchdown pass in 3rd and long to cover the number late. Cincinnati did lose last week, but they outgained Miami of Ohio 538 to 358. The offense is humming there. They only had 9 points in their final 6 red zone trips, blocked field goal, interception, some penalties. So they were a bit unlucky there. I think it's a good buy low spot on Cincinnati. First Big 12 game, very raucous environment there. I think Oklahoma's a little overvalued. For what it's worth, since 2005, teams that started 3-0 straight up and against the spread, when they're favorites, like Oklahoma is and has done, just 45, 67, and 2 against the spread. That's 40%. Failing to cover by almost a field goal per game. That includes 23, 38, and 3 when favored by 14 or more points, 37.5%. I like trends that speak to something that I can actually explain, and this is like a team start out 3-0 against the spread, straight up, probably against lesser competition. Oklahoma played Tulsa with a backup quarterback, Arkansas State with their coach crying on the sidelines, and then almost lost to SMU at home in an even statistical game. Now you get them a little overvalued, and then throw in the fact that Cincy should come out pissed off. Running underdog here, Cincy should be able to control the clock, the tempo. And I think their defensive line can give Oklahoma's offensive line some issues. The Oklahoma offensive line still has some question marks that I need to see answered. So I like the Bearcats.
Yeah, I like Cincinnati too, and I like the over in this game. And I go back to the SMU game that Oklahoma played, and I couldn't believe how many punts I saw. Oklahoma was punting like crazy for a long period of the time. And then when you look at their touchdown drives, of their 4 touchdown drives, 2 of them were just 3-play drives. They were completely explosive. That leads me to think that that's going to happen against Cincinnati, because right now Cincinnati is 131st in defending explosives and standard downs, which is where I expect Oklahoma to be most of the day. So I do like the over in this game, but Cincinnati had 540 something total yards against Miami of Ohio last week. They deserve to lose the game, but at the same time, it's not like the offense was sputtering. The offense is moving. So I do like Cincinnati to keep it within 2 TDs here.
Yeah. A little worried about the explosive pass D, but its number's too high. Texas Tech at West Virginia. West Virginia, off of that ugly win over Pitt. They have some injury concerns here, but they're hosting Texas Tech. Texas Tech's team, I can't really figure it out. Do you have anything here?
I want West Virginia, but I'm waiting on Garrett Green to start. Baron Morton played a little bit last week, took some snaps, but Tyler Shook is expected to get the start here. If Garrett Green doesn't go, he was banged up. He's day-to-day. We're not going to know probably till Saturday. It's going to be Nico Marshall and Sean Boyle waiting on the depth chart. And, there's nothing in the history of those 2 quarterbacks that says that they can run the ball. Nothing from a scrambling or elusive or missed tackles with what Garrett Green does. But Texas Tech struggles to defend the rush, 87th in line yards, 107th in stuff rate. And Texas Tech is generating 0 havoc on defense. They have no pass rush. They've fallen to 80th in quality drives. West Virginia can absolutely win this game. They just got to have their quarterback here. Tyler Shook has not been great throwing the ball. He's got more turnover-worthy plays than big-time throws. It really falls off a cliff when he gets some pressure. He's only completed 8 passes in a dirty pocket this year. So, and West Virginia is 6th in pass rush in the nation. So I see a path for West Virginia to win this game. I need the quarterback. I need the quarterback.
Yeah. All right. Keep an eye on the Action Network app. See if Colin gets a play in there in Country Roads territory. Speaking of territory, your backyard, let's let Colin talk some Arkansas. Arkansas catching 17.5 at LSU, over under 55. Basic buy low, sell high on the surface here. LSU blows out Mississippi State. I think Mississippi State's terrible. So, yeah, LSU looked good in doing it, and I upgraded them a bit, but Mississippi State's trash. Should have lost to Arizona at home. And LSU, then you have Arkansas coming off of a game where they lost to BYU, but it was kind of fluky. So, a little buy low, sell high. Arkansas tends to play LSU close no matter what. Your Hogs, this seems a little rich. Your Hogs stay within. Can your Hogs stay within 17? Or are they going to embarrass themselves?
Very rich for the fact that LSU's defense has struggled so much in tackling, finishing drives, big play, coverage. They're all outside the top 100 in those metrics. The defense has not been buttoned up. But they absolutely have, and Mississippi State just couldn't, expose any of that stuff. But the offense has been fantastic. The biggest problem that I have in backing Arkansas, because this spread flew over 17. I think I know why it flew over 17. Pittman on a presser Wednesday, is when the line moved. He stopped himself. Now, Rocket Sanders is active and practicing, but he's doing it without pads. Pittman said, "We don't expect Rocket to," and then he paused himself and he said, "Rocket's still day-to-day." So I think he kind of accidentally let the cat out of the bag that Rocket Sanders isn't going to play in this game. And if he's not, I don't trust AJ Green or DeBinion to be able to put in the load from a rushing perspective against this LSU defense. And really, the way that you attack LSU is through the air. We said this against Florida State with the JUCOs and the transfers and everything that they have in the back 7. Arkansas is not going to be able to expose that. Austin Armstrong is dropping too many passes. Jaden Wilson is dropping too many passes. KJ Jefferson is not comfortable with any of his receivers. And I've been trying to stay away from saying this all year. Dan Enos is not a good offensive coordinator. You can throw in the tape from 2017. I don't give a shit. But Dan Enos did not change the game plan against BYU. And then after 3 series, everything went downhill. And you look on the defensive side of the ball, I'm glad Travis Williams is calling a lot of aggressive pass rush and blitz, but you're leaving one high safety and playing man-to-man coverage. It's not going to work against LSU. So I need Rocket Sanders back. The line is way too rich, especially for the defense. Arkansas can play backdoor all day, but they got to have their horse running back.
Yeah, I might get involved there. If they lose, I will slander you on Twitter if they don't cover. But no bet, yeah. Again, keep an eye on the Action Network app to see what we play. And also Big Bets on Campus live, 10:30 a.m. Eastern with myself, Colin, and Brett McMurphy. Baylor, Texas. Texas over a 2-touchdown favorite here. This also seems a bit rich, but Baylor hasn't looked great. Their offensive line hasn't looked great, which is bad news against Texas. Blake Shapen's going to be out. Dominic Richardson, their running back's out. Their offense looked bad against Long Island last week for a while. But this is Baylor Super Bowl at home against Texas. You should have expected them to come out with their hair on fire. Do they have enough to not get blown out? I would lean Bears here over 2 touchdowns. Any thoughts?
I would. Yeah, I make it 12. And I mean, I wish I could give everybody advanced stats as the reason why you should back Baylor. I do know that every time it hits 14, the market bounces back. I don't have any reason why Baylor is going to be able to backdoor this or why they're going to get their offensive line figured out and be able to rush on Texas. You know, Texas's deficiencies really are against the pass. They haven't been that great in coverage and passing success rate. You know, and they've actually been pretty bad defensively and passing down. So if I'm reading this correctly, 131st in defending explosives and passing downs. The problem is I don't think anybody in Baylor can expose that.
Well, you don't have Shapen, so
yeah,
you're starting quarterback. And then if you wanted to play ball control, you don't have Richardson. It's really tough for Baylor. And then your offensive line is bad against Texas's defensive front.
Maybe I bet Baylor because of the numbers, but there's just not a lot here on the Baylor side for me to justify it.
All right, let's get to some trash. I got 5 games here. You just say yes or no, and if you want to offer a sentence or two, you can. Vandy plus 14. I think you disagree with this one. I need 14 here, but it's a pure hold your nose spot on Vandy coming home after a loss to UNLV. They're at home against Kentucky. For what it's worth, Stoops has only been a favorite of over 14 or more points in the SEC 4 times. They've all come against Vandy. He hasn't covered one of them. Usually is pretty conservative in this spot. They have Florida on deck as well. Then the schedule gets really tough. Noon start in Nashville. Kentucky has come out sleepy in every game it's played. Their offense hasn't looked great, and that's against Eastern Kentucky. They didn't score in the first half. Team that gave up like 60 to Cincy. Ball State and Akron. There's a mechanical issue that Devin Leary's working through. The offensive line will still be without its best offensive lineman, and Horsey should be back for Florida. So that kind of mixes everything up and doesn't give you the ideal big blue wall. The receivers haven't been great. So, I think that, Vandy's defense is a train wreck. Leary's going to put up some numbers here. This UK defense you can usually trust under Brad White, but they lost a lot. We haven't seen them tested yet this year. And AJ Swan, who should be fully healthy here. Leary got banged up too last week also for what it's worth. But Swan's fully healthy. They got great receivers. It's pretty much all they have is a passing attack. So I think they can put up enough points against a potentially sleepy Kentucky team to either cover or get in the back door here. I like Vandy, who beat Kentucky outright last year as a 17-point dog in Lexington.
Yeah, I mean, I bought this on open on Sunday when it was 12.5 because I power rated above 2 touchdowns. Also with the thought that AJ Swan did get banged up. I didn't know the severity if it really was any kind of injury. Turns out it's just bruised up and he's going to be fine and keep on playing. So everybody's not upset and surprised, I will absolutely be buying back on Vanderbilt at 14 or 14.5. It is something that I power rated higher, but at the same time with Leary and his mechanics and the fact that AJ Swan is fine, I just was under the impression the way I power rated, it would go above 14, which it did for a while. Now it's coming back. I'm going to buy out and have a little small window.
Next one, probably maybe the ugliest of them all. I'm going to go Pitt against Carolina. I can't get to this number. Pitt's offense is embarrassing. Jerkovich, 35 of 75 for 474, 158 per game. 4 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Most of that came against Duquesne and Cincy in garbage time. The offense has been terrible. The defense is still fine. It's always going to be fine there. The offense can't complete a pass. I mean, the interceptions last week were horrendous. He looked like lost, and he lofted one of the double coverage. The reunion with Cincinnati, who we thrived under in 2020, is not going to plan.
Yep.
And now they're playing Drake May, and the Carolina offense is off to a 3-0 start, beat South Carolina, beat Minnesota, beat App State. So how the fuck is Pitt going to cover this number? Well, Pitt does this every year. And they will have bad losses, and then they'll beat a ranked team at home. They've had 2 embarrassing losses in a row. You should get a best effort here. For what it's worth, Narduzzi, to my point, I'm not just making that up, 6-1 against the spread as a home conference underdog of at least a field goal, covering by over 12 points per game. He's won 5 in a row outright as a home conference dog of at least a field goal. This is just what Pitt does. I have to assume, I just can't get to this number. I'm at 5, and I'm assuming that this Pitt offense is the worst it's been in very, very long time. Jerkovich has to be a little better. If not, I know Narduzzi's saying we're not making a quarterback change. We're not making. I assume he's got to go to the Penn State transfer. But what Pitt is going to do here, and they tried to do it last week, but West Virginia's run defense is actually pretty good. They're going to come out and they're going to try to run the ball 100 times. Last week, they ran the ball 16 of their first 17 plays. The second throw of the game, the first was just this little tiny baby throw. The first throw of the game, the real throw, was at 5 minutes ago in the first half. And then Jerkovich threw a pick. And then West Virginia scored, and then they scored again on another pick. They're going to come out here and just try to run. And you could do that against North Carolina. Like yards per attempt, North Carolina against the run, 113th. Stuff rate, 64th. West Virginia is 24th and 4th in those categories. Second level yards, West Virginia 9th. North Carolina 103rd. Line yards, West Virginia 13th. North Carolina 93rd. Rush play success rate, West Virginia 36th. North Carolina 70th. Rush play explosiveness, West Virginia 2nd. North Carolina 93rd. So I think that they can establish the run here. North Carolina, by the way, like you have Pitt that will win these weird kind of games. They get into weird games with these inferior opponents. Like the App State, they're in double overtime with App State. I think Pitt somehow is going to win this game. I don't know how. Don't ask me how. But it's just what the Pitt does. I like Pitt over a touchdown.
I can tell you how. North Carolina has a collection of 2 of the worst coordinators in all of FBS football. Now, I'm not going to go on a hate for Gene Chizik, but I will go on a hate for Chip Lindsey. How do you have Drake May and you fall this far off on your scoring? And I will point directly to finishing drives, the biggest stat that I use for covering spreads. 21 drives for North Carolina have gone past the 40-yard line. North Carolina is averaging 3.2 points, which is good, more than a half point less than national average every year. They are 105th in offensive finishing drives. I don't understand how that's possible when you have a quarterback that could potentially be second in the NFL draft. I mean, they're going to go right behind Caleb, right? It makes no sense. These coordinators could get beat at any point. I haven't made the decision if I'm going to join you. But yeah, I don't have a problem fading North Carolina. I can tell you that.
I have good, just weird. Sometimes, over time, you just get intuition about games. I can't get there on my number. I think Pitt can control the clock here, get a little home running dog, and just getting that intuition that Pitt's going to win this game. By the way, last year, I do think the offense is going to take a step back too. May is always going to be good. And it does. I have a little fear that Pitt plays press, leaves their man on islands a lot in quarters. And May's deep ball is great. So maybe they play a little softer after last year. But last year in the loss against UNC, Josh Downs and Antoine Green had 21 catches for 282 yards and 4 touchdowns. They're both in the NFL, fortunately for Pitt. And yeah, I agree. The coordinator has been a downgrade. And May's been great, but he's 4 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Last year, 38 touchdowns, 7 interceptions.
Yep.
All right, next trash. I have to do this. Cal, 3 touchdowns or more. I'm getting in front of the train of Washington, who put up over 700 yards, and they basically called it quits after midway through the third quarter. Washington's arguably like the best team in the country so far. Doesn't mean they are, but results-wise, they've been fantastic. But Cal and Justin Wilcox, they do one thing exceptionally well. They ugly up these games with superior competition. No coach does it better. Look last year. Cal was dreadful last year. They lost by 1 possession at Notre Dame, lost by 1 possession at USC, lost by 1 possession against UCLA. By the way, they lost by 1 possession against this Washington team. It was 21-21 at midway through the fourth quarter. They lost 28-21 and covered. That game last year against Cal, against this high-powered Washington, it was 6-0 at the half. They take away explosive plays, so they're doing that again here. They're going to rely on their ground game. I think he can have some success here, but they just find ways to ugly up games. Wilcox 26-11-1 against the spread as an underdog. That's insane, over 70%. How about 21-6 against the spread when catching more than 4 points? That's ridiculous. So, yeah, this Washington team, I'm betting it's scary to get in front of them. They're a machine right now, but I'm betting that Cal can ugly this up, and I'm betting that this is probably the peak of the market on Washington after what they've done so far by bludgeoning teams. They've also taken their foot off the gas a couple times. That's how Tulsa covered. So backdoor could be wide open here. I like Cal. It's scary, but I need the 21.
Yeah, and first off, I'm really happy Jalen McMillan's going to be fine. I thought when he got injured against Michigan State, I thought this is such a huge injury, especially what he does from the inside with crossers and going over the middle. That's such a huge part for Washington. So that makes me wonder if they kind of just throw it into second and third gear and say, let's take let's just moderately go about this game and try to be more methodical than explosive, because we are going on the road against Arizona. I could absolutely see Kalen DeBoer, Michael Penix, everybody just calling off the dogs and having a week where they win by 14-17 and not having to go balls to the wall like they did against Michigan State. I think it's still interesting. Like, I think
are you too traumatized from that Michigan State bet to bet Cal here?
What's funny is like everybody's all, I know I lost that bet taking Michigan State, but I said on the podcast, it's like, I think that the market is just way too high on what, how bad Michigan State is going to be. But at the same time, I pocketed a couple dimes on a game of the year -5.5. I mean, I nailed the Washington -5.5 game of the year opener. I was happy about that result. And then I had a single bet on Michigan State. I mean, that didn't go so well, but.
Are you going to back Cal is the question.
Not at 20. I would at 21. I would at 21.5.
Throw some balls. All right. Last trash. This should have been in the marquee matchup, by the way. 7 Eastern, baby. You got Oregon State, Washington State, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Iowa, Penn State. You know what's going to be on my main screen?
Oh, boy.
Eat 'em up, Cats, baby. Sam Houston State, 7 Eastern, ESPN Plus Big 12 Network against Houston. At Houston, we're taking the points. I'm waiting on this to see if it goes up. It's probably not, because who the fuck is going to bet Houston, this corpse of a team? How will Sam Houston State score? I don't know. They had a bye. I'm sure they worked on the offense. Maybe you'll see Grant Cannell here. It's been 2 weeks. The defense got the rest, too. Houston's a mess. I can't tell you how much of a mess they are. They should have lost to UTSA. They had 17 gifted points, won 17-14 against that UTSA defense. Then the next week, they're down 28-0 against Rice. And then you assume and they lose to Rice. You assume a bounce back spot, Big 12 opener, your program opener, you're hosting the defending national runner-ups. You get seal clubbed by TCU, and the final score doesn't do it justice. I think it was 34-13. They didn't score an offensive touchdown. First time Houston hasn't done that since 2014. They had a kick return for a touchdown. In the second half, at one point, they had 21 plays for 52 yards in a blowout. This offense is broken. They missed Clayton Tune and Tank Dell. Donovan Smith hasn't been anywhere close to what they expected. I think he's hurt as well. He said he had an oblique injury after the last week's game. That would explain it, because they also can't run the ball. They're averaging 3 yards per rush. So the defense is also a mess. They lost 2 guys to the NFL in the secondary. They lost their top pass rushers. This team's a corpse. All the quotes coming out of Houston are bad. I think the locker room might be gone. Dana might be gone sooner rather than later. Sam Houston should come in here fired up. They might be. I feel like they need at least a touchdown here. But Houston comes out every one of these games and they dig themselves a hole when Dana's a favorite. He's 7-17 against the spread as a favorite of 10 or more points in his head coaching career. 17-27-1. That's poor. I'm going to hope Sam Houston State figures out something. Maybe there's a chance they lose this game 10-0. We're taking the points. Eat 'em up, Cats.
I'm 100% behind you. Houston has overlooked to the biggest game on their schedule because they talked about it at Big 12 Media Day, and that is Texas Tech. Not to mention Donovan Smith is a transfer from Texas Tech, not to mention Dana's ties to the air raid, to Tech, everything is Texas Tech, Houston. That's the new big rivalry in the Big 12. That's all Houston wanted to talk about when I talked to them back in July. So that big game is next week. Probably not paying attention to Sam Houston here, couple stats I'll leave you with here because I know that this is your team. This is going to be America's team soon, the amount we preach about them. In passing downs on defense, Sam Houston is number 1 in the nation in passing down success rate on defense. Sam Houston is number 2 in the nation in limiting explosive plays in passing downs on defense. Now,
and Houston can't run it.
Houston can't. Yeah. So what is Houston? Just the most undisciplined team that's ever been on the face of the earth that's going to find themselves in passing down. So our defense is going to cook. I'm sorry I took Air Force a couple weeks ago against Sam Houston. I've been reminded by you and my Coach Sam Pittman that Sam Houston's actually pretty good. I'm going to be with you here. Let's see if that 12.5, we can get it up to 13.
Yeah, Sam Houston, by the way, the most impressive thing about their day is they shut down 2 completely different attacks, a triple option and then BYU's attack with Slovis. They completely stymied Slovis in that offense, an offense that went into Hogtown and put up 38, although even it was part of it. And Air Force's offenses look good other than that game too. The Sam Houston offense is so bad, I cannot say anything good about it. Their quarterback's thrown for under 200 yards total in 2 games that they lost, and they're averaging 1 yard per carry, which is dead last in the country. I think 1.1. It'd be a record low. Hopefully,
they're 133rd in so many offensive categories.
Their defense is all elite categories, and it's like a group of 5. There's been some San Diego State teams that have looked like that, some Iowa teams, but taking the points. All right, before we move on, go 3 and out here. Colin, let's take a second to mention our sponsor, Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit. Factor hooks you up with delicious, chef-prepared, ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your house. You'll save time, eat well, and stay on track with a healthy lifestyle. There are 3 main things we love about Factor: no chopping, prepping, or cleaning up. You get great flavor and the nutritional quality you need to tackle challenging topics like the Iowa offense. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are ready in just 2 minutes. So run your own 2-minute drill with Factor and enjoy eating well without the hassle. Select your meals and enjoy fresh meals delivered to your door. Just head to factormeals.com/BBOC50, that's 50, and use code BBOC50 to get 50% off. Again, that's factormeals.com/BBOC50, and use the code BBOC50 to get 50% off. Producer loves those. I'm still waiting on mine to arrive, so I will let you guys know how they are, but I've heard nothing but great things. All right, before we get out of here, let's go 3 and out. All right, let's start Friday Night Lights. We'll have all these written up on actionnetwork.com, the Action Network app. Colin, I'll give you a minute to run through your thoughts. I'll say mine real quick. Wisconsin, Purdue. I'm buying Purdue. Purdue hasn't beat Wisconsin since the Revolutionary War, but Wisconsin looks horrendous on offense. Their offense, it's just a huge culture shift and everything about it. It's not working. The defense is also worrying. People aren't talking about the Wisconsin defense. They could have lost to Georgia Southern if Georgia Southern didn't turn it over 15 times. I think Purdue is live here. They should score in this Wisconsin defense. I like the home dog. NC State, Virginia, I have no thoughts. Brennan Armstrong, revenge game against Virginia. We'll see if Musket or Calandria starts. I got nothing there. Boise State, San Diego State. I like San Diego State, a touchdown or better. Their defenses look bad, but so is Boise's. These are 2 quarterbacks who can't really throw it, prefer to run it. But Boise's not really running their quarterback. 2 great special teams, 2 good kickers, 2 good punters, although San Diego State's the same kicker and punter. These 2 teams that kind of look like mirrors to me. I'll happily take the touchdown. I think the San Diego State defense, which is definitely down, can still force Green into a couple mistakes here. Air Force, San Jose State. I normally would look at San Jose State here, but I'm concerned about their defensive line and their triple option type defensive metrics. So you look at stuff rate and things like that. They lost 2 really elite defensive linemen from last year. That's hard to replace at a school like San Jose State. So I'm passing there. But I like the 2 home dogs in Purdue and San Diego State. You got quick thoughts on any of the games Friday night?
Yeah, completely agree with you on Air Force. I'm opposite of you, taking Boise State. I'm letting that number come down a little bit. Was it 7? It's taking some heat today on San Diego State, down to 6 at one of the sharper shops. Listen, to me, this comes down to 2 offenses that have completely different metrics when it comes to running the ball, an offensive momentum killer, which Boise State is top 25. They don't stop themselves. They're very, they don't have a lot of havoc allowed, especially when they run the ball. But from a rushing success perspective, they are top 30. And that is where San Diego State has had huge problems. They are dead last in the nation in defending the rush. They are 130th in line yards, and they're 127th in defensive stuff rate. Boise State is trying with Bush Hamdan at offensive coordinator. They just want to pound the ball, pound the rock, and they're not letting Taylor Green run whatsoever. So I expect them to have a ton of success in running the ball. And then defensively, it's just a scramble drill with Jalen Maiden. And as much as I love San Diego State and I love betting the overs here, they're nothing more than a scramble drill on offense, and their defense has, like I said, been terrible against the rush. So I'm going to take Boise after that number comes down a little bit. I do power rate it at 6.9. Nice for Boise State there, so I'm going to let it come down. I'm going to be on the Broncos.
All right, we'll be head-to-head there. Let's move on to second down, and that's our favorite. I will start. I don't think I've lost one of these yet, so I will keep it going, and we're going Texas A&M against Auburn. This is a game I had circled since last year. So, and I faded Texas A&M. I faded Texas A&M until the cows came home last year. And I remember betting Auburn against them. And Auburn, in a game where their quarterback went 6 of 16 for 60 yards, and I think a couple picks. Auburn won that game 13-10. It was against a shorthanded, deflated Texas A&M team. Handed Texas A&M their 7th loss and celebrated like they won the national title. I'm talking confetti, Cadillac Williams being hurled around the stadium. I've never seen anything like it for a regular season win against a team that was under 500. Good for Auburn. I never care when teams celebrate, but that taste still in Texas A&M's mouth. They want revenge here, and everything's perfectly set up. I think Stewart, their star receiver, is going to play too. This Texas A&M offense is rolling. I don't think Auburn's going to be able to stop them. And Texas A&M's run defensive issues from last year, they've been fixed. I don't know what the hell went on last year because they have the talent. And if you look, a lot of people remember that Texas A&M at Miami game. Miami's legit. Texas A&M, Miami got them through the air. Auburn can't throw the ball. I mean, look at the Cal game. Auburn should have lost that game. They converted a 3rd and 17 late. They were down 10-7 or 10-8 with late in the fourth quarter. This offense, Hugh Freeze has not fixed it yet. It's going to take time. Texas A&M is going to come out here and stomp all over Auburn and not let up, and then celebrate after. I like Texas A&M double digits or more.
I'm going to stay in the SEC, and I'm going to go with the game we already talked about, and that's Tennessee over UTSA. Some injury concerns going on with Frank Harris. We don't know if he's going to be there. If he is he going to be able to run around? And if he's not there at all, we have 2 quarterbacks that don't have any kind of history of running. So it really kind of takes the UTSA offense out of their norm of what they like to do. And then on the defensive side of the ball, they have been atrocious in defending the pass, and that's not a good look against a Tennessee team that wants to go extremely fast and throw the ball a lot, especially after getting embarrassed last week against a rival in Florida. Now they come home, try to get it straight, try to get it right. There's no overlook for Tennessee here in this spot. It's a great spot to get back there. And if Joe Milton isn't there, Nico's a great reserve quarterback that we've all been waiting to come in. I think he can run this offense probably a little bit better. So look for Tennessee to take advantage of a very, very poor UTSA pass defense. And at the same time, if Frank Harris isn't playing for our beloved Roadrunners, that makes it even more of an issue. I like Tennessee minus 21, hook 22, whatever. Should be a blowout for these guys. They need it after that loss to Florida.
By the way, a couple of quarterback injuries worth watching. There'll be a bunch, but Kansas State, Will Howard, day-to-day. Missouri, Brady Cook, day-to-day. And we'll see if Oklahoma State ever names a starting quarterback. We'll have to ask Brett about that. All right, before we get out of here, we have one final task, and that's on third down, and that's our underdog moneyline parlay, our 2 favorite underdogs. Did I forget to say favorite overdogs for second down? Man, if I did, I apologize to our beloved caller in that segment after. I know, but I should have said favorite second down, our favorite overdog. I got to get that in the show. But our underdog moneyline parlay, we cast last week. You finally got on the board for us, and Florida got there along with your JMU, so good call there. And I had a couple people reach out and say that they hit their parlay, so that was nice. I think like 6-1. This week, I don't need to just hold up my shirt. Miner Nation. We're getting a win and we're getting a cover this week. Small underdogs. This is, I think, a good spot. Buy low, sell high. UNLV off that win over an SEC team. I'm still not completely sold on this team. And they have Mountain West play, I think, starts next week. They go to UTEP. Sleepy spot. I think UTEP will be up for this one. I think the Miners get them. Not much else more to it than that. I like the number and the spot. So let's go Miner Nation. And where are you going?
Yeah, this one kind of surprised me. I'm going to take Georgia Tech to beat Wake Forest outright. Wake Forest is absolutely horrendous. There's a difference in strength of schedule here. Georgia Tech is 15th in the nation. They played some big boys. Wake Forest is 125th, and they beat Old Dominion by 3 last week, 27-24.
Down 24-7 in the second half.
Down 24-7. It's actually, but I mean, if you go back and look, like Elon covered against them with that field goal there at the end. They played Vandy. I mean, there's not a lot going on.
Vandy had a muff punt that Wake returned for a touchdown, and Vandy had 3 turnovers too. That Wake hasn't played anyone. The defense has questions too. But go ahead.
So when you have a strength of schedule of 125th and you consider the teams that they've played, if I see red marks in your advanced analytics, that's really bad. You're almost dead last in offensive rush explosiveness. You can't defend the run whatsoever by line yards and rushing success rate. Georgia Tech is a blue-collar grinding team, and I love Haynes King. I love these kids, and they get after it. I don't think they're capable of having a down week, and I bet they're pretty pissed off about Lane Kiffin scoring a touchdown at the very end. Give me Georgia Tech to win this outright. This is a team that's going to exceed their win total. They're going to upset some people, and this is going to be one of them.
I agree. Yeah, Georgia Tech really should have beat Louisville. They could have beat. I mean, they were pretty even with Ole Miss before those late shenanigans. They had a couple of special teams blunders, but I agree here. I like Georgia Tech as well. I'm glad you picked that. All right, that'll do it for us. Thank you, as always, to Colin. Thanks to our producer, Matt Mitchell, who's trolling me on Twitter right now. He said currently on a Zoom meeting with Stuckey. He's shouting, "Eat 'em up, cats," and looking around like he's in an arena full of people. Thanks, as always, to you. Thanks to all of you. Make sure you subscribe. Subscribe. Tell a friend, tell an enemy. We will do giveaways on the Sunday recap show. So if you leave a 5-star review, I don't care what you say, then you will get, we'll do some giveaways. So make sure that you leave those. They really help us out. Big Bets on Campus Live, 10:30 a.m. Eastern on Saturday. Make sure you download the award-winning Action Network app. Make sure you check out the Group of 5 guys. They hit those Group of 5 games and do a tremendous job. That episode's already out. Comes out every Wednesday morning. And like I said, our recap episode will be back on Sunday night, Monday morning to recap and look ahead to week 5. It's a hell of a slate. Enjoy it. Let's win some money and have some fun while doing so. Appreciate all of you. Can't wait for Saturday. Good luck with all of your bets. Cheers.
Peace out.